Free public transport and the massive afforestation project among the main proposals announced in yesterday's budget. Illegal excavation works being carried out by Joseph Portelli on old land in Ala. The number of establishments that have agreed to restrict access to vaccinated people has been announced. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. My name is Yannick, and with me is Diacono, and we're going to be running you through today's top stories, starting off with today's main story, the budget. Tim, you want to start us off?
Yes, so the budget was presented by the government yesterday. We don't have, unfortunately, 2.5 hours to go through every single announcement that was made. However, here are a couple of the highlights from it. 40,000 trees will be planted in Wadar Park, as a new busquet in the south will be created right here on our point. Free bus rides to the entire nation as of October. Shift workers are going to get a benefit of €150 if they earn under €20,000 a year, and if they work night shifts or weekend shifts or graveyard shifts. These are basically jobs mostly in catering that require that are witnessing a quite significant staff shortage, and this is intended to give them a bit of a boost. Huge incentives for people to buy abandoned buildings, properties in urban conservation areas. These are financial incentives, tax rebates, intended to try as much as possible to keep unless it's too late, to keep our heritage intact, rather than building it all up and building apartments from it. Higher pensions, more benefits, significantly larger grant for electric cars, as well as plug-in hybrid cars. This is a way to push people away from cars, away from regular cars and towards electric vehicles, and a new COLA mechanism to help specifically vulnerable people adapt to inflation. Now, obviously the government is using the budget, as it does always, as a great promotional purposes. There's billboards everywhere. There's a huge banner I saw in Valletta displaying the budget. It's a really cute logo as well. The Nationalist Party is coming up with quite a funny response, to be honest. They're focusing a lot on the element of the debt, of the deficit, which obviously went up because we literally locked down the entire country for twice. The whole world did, and there was obviously trade restrictions, and the government kept giving unproductive workers a full salary. So obviously the deficit is going to explode. The PN is strangely doesn't want to link the pandemic to this. It's trying to say this is due to corruption. I feel it's a bit of a weak response, to be honest. What do you think?
Well, I mean, as you said, the government, the national debt has gone up. The deficit has increased. But as you mentioned, we are coming off a pandemic that saw government spending millions on workers' wages, on testing, on vaccination. So, while the PN's argument obviously does make sense, because excessive spending and direct orders, we very often hear about people, money being splashed around. If that weren't being spent, the deficit could potentially be smaller. That being said, the main driver of the deficit, remains COVID. So I understand part of the criticism, though I think it's probably not 100% justified. I mean, the budget from a broader perspective, I suppose, it does appear that government has heard people's concerns when it comes to sort of quality of life, the environment, and the surroundings. So there was a bit of a push to try and improve this. As always, it was a budget that kind of identifies pockets in society that need addressing, and they address those sectors specifically. The budget has been criticized for kind of a lack of vision and the lack of new economic sectors, as we always hear. but it would seem that most people are happy with it because it gives a little bit to everyone.
And it's funny that in Malta, like, it shows how politically engaged we are, that the budget is actually considered a huge deal. As in, I don't think it's considered so much of a national annual event in any other country, right?
I highly doubt it. No. It's one of the other things that makes us such a special place. On to our next story. Excavation works on a massive apartment block on ODZ land in Ala are currently underway, despite the fact that no permits have been issued for the development. Pressure group movement Graffiti raised the alarm this morning in a Facebook post in which it lashed out basically at the authorities for allowing this illegal work to go ahead unabated. The group described the work as another shocking situation in which the developer was being allowed to do whatever they wanted. And it also questioned how long the authorities would continue to be quote-unquote servile to Portelli's arrogance. Development is being proposed opposed by a large number of residents as well as civil society groups, all of whom have expressed their despair at the fact that nobody appears to be able or willing to enforce planning laws, especially with Joseph Portelli, the developer behind this project. According to promotional material for the development, the site which is currently being developed will also include a pool, and it seems that the excavation works currently underway are on the same site of this pool. However, once again, no permit has been granted for the pool's construction. The project will see 64 apartments being built, and as we said, has been opposed by the Ala Local Council, Graffiti, Dilnart Hello, and the whole host of NGOs. In fact, even an environmental impact assessment for the project, which has actually been applied through 4 separate projects in order to break it up and allow it to get past planning laws, was never carried out.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why I find it very difficult to take the government's, green pledges seriously. Yeah. So, on one day you hear that they're thinking of planning, they're going to plant 40,000 trees at Wadar Park. But then, in the same breath, you're destroying a beautiful land in Gozo, so Joseph Portelli can become richer, and this is even in land that's partially outside development zone. So it's a huge contradiction, and it's really sad because, Malta, sometimes I don't think we realize how much of a gem Gozo is even for tourists. The fact that it's relatively untouched, unspoiled, and very much how it was several years ago. Malta has a lot of competition from. I've just been to a Greek island. Like it's there. Like people, a lot of tourists want this experience of going, of somehow stepping back in time. And it will be hugely unfortunate if Malta decides to let Gozo free at the hands of developers like this.
We live in hope.
Yeah, we live in hope. But unfortunately, when you hear like, we're going to tackle the environment and then the electric cars and green Gozo and then this. It's like, come on, it's like you're not ready to let a developer suffer a little bit for the greater good. Doesn't seem like it. Health Minister Chris Fern, moving on to our next story. Health Minister Chris Fern has confirmed that only 25 restaurants and bars have so far been approved to limit access to vaccinated people. Now, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, the ministry announced with quite a bit of pomp that restaurants will be able and bars will be able to benefit from fewer restrictions and fewer COVID restrictions, such as sort of distance between tables, maybe to stay open to 3 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. The music can be slightly higher, and even there'll be some kind of self-service for drinks at the bar. So, but this came with a catch. If restaurants and bars wanted to take these measures on board, they would have to restrict access to vaccinated people, complete with checks and inspections to make sure they're doing it. Only 40 have applied, and 25 have been accepted, with the new rules coming into force last weekend. Doesn't seem like a lot, to be honest. No. It doesn't seem like a lot, which is probably a good thing, because you don't want to have restaurants like just. It always bugged me, this, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think
it's a bit discriminatory.
I stand to be corrected, but it feels like the pandemic is no longer on many people's minds, and I would suspect that possibly even the enforcement of these regulations at bars and restaurants has decreased to some extent. So probably the drive on the part of bar owners, to go through this hassle of ensuring all their employees are vaccinated, having someone at the door to check vaccination certificates, might not be worth their while, because ultimately, the economy is back open. And they can still operate. It's interesting to note that while we still have these measures, the budget speech yesterday kind of made very little mention of any possible resurgence of COVID or any possible restrictions being implemented down the line. In fact, Health Minister Chris Fearn during his speech on a number of times said the pandemic, we can put the pandemic on the back burner now that it's kind of behind us. So it seems that I guess one would also question why it is that we still have some of these restrictions in place, when it seems that the government has also removed COVID from its thinking.
It's a very good question. I have my own suspicions as to why this is, but I asked Chris Fearn about this today. In fact, about the question was, are you budgeting for potential restrictions that might have to be imposed in winter? He said, can I forecast if an earthquake's going to hit Malta? Like, I just as I can't forecast if a new variant might hit up, or new virus.
As unlikely as an earthquake.
Basically, hopefully.
Essentially.
but obviously Chris Fearn is one of the main drivers of promoters of these restrictions, so it's good to see that even he is now vocally distancing himself from them.
Or looking forward, let's say. Let's not say distancing. Like
exactly, like looking forward and putting this disastrous experience behind us.
Well, let's hope so. Our next story is about Malta's sexual health policy, or lack thereof, rather. So the publication of this sexual health policy has been delayed once again, since the first draft of the policy was found to be based on outdated information, Health Minister Chris Fearn announced today. The Minister was speaking during a press conference on yesterday's budget, during which he was asked about a €50,000 allocation for Malta's sexual health policy, which is listed in the budget. So last year, Fearn had pledged that Malta's first and only sexual health policy, which was published 12 years ago, would be completed by March this year. However, 7 months down the line, and there's still no sight of this new policy. So when asked, the minister explained that the first draft had been presented to him, and it was based on, in his words, premises that were kind of 12 years old. He said, since then the country's laws, the country's mentality, the country has changed. And he said that he had instructed public health to commission a new study that captured Malta's present-day thoughts and opinions on sexual health practices, so that decisions can be taken on the basis of quote-unquote today and not yesterday's facts. He promised that a draft of this first new policy would be completed by the end of the year, with the policy expected sometime next year.
Talk of something being put on the back burner. This is something that they've been talking about for years, and now there's another timeline, another next year for this policy to be. I think updates I really don't get, to be honest, like why the government, which is very progressive on other issues, is so reluctant to just update this policy, to be honest, and why it's surely like if they put through some more resources that they would have had it just drafted but implemented and in full force at the moment.
Okay.
So yeah,
good point.
And on to our final story, the Cannabis Authority, or to use the full term, the Authority for the Responsible Use of Cannabis, which will be which has been envisaged in the current cannabis reform that was presented by the government last week, has actually been included in the budget. So the budget includes a line for so-called cannabis regulation, and it allocates €100,000, which we believe it's not set in stone. It's something that can be increased in these, because €100,000 sounds like peanuts to set up an authority. Like you'll hire a maximum of 3 people, perhaps, or 4 people. But it's there. It means they have something to a basis to work on, and it's actually seeing money allocated to it shows it's actually it's happening, right? Hopefully, it's not just a bluff or an electoral gimmick, but something that's possibly happening. this authority is going to regulate the sector, it's going to be regulating the cannabis associations that are going to form. There's still a lot of question marks. One of the big ones being, who is going to run it, right? Who's going to be the chairperson? Who's going to be the CEO? Because with an authority like this, with so much regulation and quite a lot, and especially being new,
Yeah,
it's the wrong person can kill it in its cradle. If someone just is going to step in with the mindset like, look, I am going to limit this as much as possible. I'm going to make sure that it's regulated to the max. You're going to kill it, and no one's going to, and the black market is going to thrive, and the whole purpose of the bill will be defeated. If you have the person with the right mindset, who actually, respects the rights of people to do whatever they want and to relax with cannabis if they so please, and who even might see a potential industry forming. We mentioned new sectors, potentially could be one of them. I don't know why no one's talking about it. Then it could thrive.
I mean, I think in terms of it being a new industry, because they've made the government has emphasized this idea that cannabis associations are non-profit entities. I suppose that's kind of perhaps one of the reasons why it's not being considered as a new entity. But what you said about having the right person in charge of the authority actually makes a lot of sense, because both having someone who is too restrictive who views it as a problem, that would be problematic, but also someone who's maybe too liberal and too let stuff just happen without proper enforcement will also be problematic. I think it's essential that this reform is kind of gotten right, especially in the first few months, so that ultimately everyone can have peace of mind that this is going to work, and it's not going to, all the doom and gloom scenarios we've heard from some quarters aren't going to materialize. So that's it from us. Before we go, just a quick reminder that voting for Lovin Malta Social Media Awards, powered by Dragonara Casino, starts tomorrow at noon. So be sure to head to thelovinawards.com to place your vote for one of the 6 finalists in each category. That's it from us. Thank you very much for following, and have an evening full of love.